Page 30, Gradual C. This is the first video I'm doing in this book. This is Unit 4. I'm not really covering videos for Units 1 through 3 because I cover all that stuff as I go through these videos on all these other units. However, I will just quickly touch on these other things. I'll leave it to you to read those pages, and I'm sure you can read them as well as I can and understand them as well as I can. But at the beginning, they're telling you about the posture and the hand position, and there's a lot of difference of opinion on this. Okay, so let's just keep it simple. As far as posture goes, you need to be comfortable. Not real comfortable as in laid back comfortable. Comfortable as in a good posture. They have a good picture of it there on page 5 at the top where it shows a person sitting at the keyboard, and that's a good posture. You notice the forearms are pretty much parallel to the ground. You're not real high, not real low. There's some variations on that. You see people playing high or low or whatever. Usually it's pretty level. Hand position, there's difference in hand position. Some people would like to grab the ball. To me, if you just relax your hands, that's the position. You don't have to grab any ball or curve anything. You just relax them. That's it. You just put them on the piano relaxed like that. That's it. Sometimes as you're playing, you have to stretch them out a little bit or curve them up in there, but generally it's just this position. That's it. So that's where we are. Then you know the fingers are numbered, with thumb being 1 and little finger being 5, and we have to be careful here because if you play a guitar or violin or something, finger numbers are different. So careful if you play those instruments, don't get confused. But we start with the thumb as being 1 because we use them all. Now they're giving you the basic note values of quarter note, half note. It's up to you to just memorize them. I don't have any help for you there. If you have flashcards, they can help you go over them. You just need to know them. I talk about them so much in the videos, you're going to know them anyway. As far as how many counts, that depends on the time signature. Well, that doesn't help unless you know what a time signature is. So as far as how many counts they go, I'll come back to that. All you need to know for now is that a half note is the same as 2 quarter notes because they're all in relation with each other. So a half note is the same as 2 quarter notes. So if you know how many counts a quarter note gets, then you know how many counts a half note gets, but a quarter note doesn't always get 1 count. That's the problem. And then a dotted half note gets 3 quarter notes, and a whole note is the same as 4 quarter notes, and I'll come back to these a little later. I want to talk about that dotted half note, a little bit. The rhythm stuff there on pages 6 and 7, they give you counting, and I hesitate doing any of that until you've had a time signature. They haven't told you what the time signature is yet. So I'll talk about this in the music, not the way they're presenting it here. Then they talk about the layout of the keyboard. Well, if you look at it, it's really neatly laid out. It's very nice because we don't label the keys A, B, and beginners sometimes will try and put them in. Won't you label these keys? And the answer is because there isn't time to read them. When you're playing, you don't have time to think about, let's see, where's the A? It all has to be instant. You have to know this. And it'll take some time, but you'll get to know it. It's based on where the black keys are, because if you look at the black keys, they're in groups of 2 and 3, and it alternates 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, blah, da, da. We use that pattern to tell us what the other notes are. Because if it repeats here, then the notes repeat. There's only 7 notes to learn. It's A through G, the first 7 letters of the alphabet. It's not A is, you just have to memorize where the notes are, and I leave that up to you. I don't have any help there. It's just you got to learn them. Just learn that an A is in a group of 3 black keys. It's in the upper middle. See, there's 2 middle notes, and the A is the upper one. So they're all A's. Go find all the A's on the piano. Those are A's. So you just learn each of these 7 keys that way, and you got them. That's sort of what they're talking about with groups of 2 and 3 black keys. And then they also want to talk about dynamic signs. They just throw a lot of stuff at you. I mean, when you're first learning to play a piano, you can control, or in theory, you can control how loud or soft it is by how how fast the key goes down, or another way of looking at it is how hard you push it down. I don't like using that because we try and avoid tension, but that's the idea. The idea is if you push it down harder, you push it down faster, and the faster you push it down, the faster the hammer hits the string and the louder it is. That's the deal. So the idea with dynamic signs is how loud or soft you're going to play. I'll have to talk about that a little later. I got problems with dynamic signs. It's just that when you're first learning to play a piano, you got enough to do just trying to hit the right notes at the right time. Don't need to worry about how loud or soft it is yet. I mean, let's take this one thing at a time. But if you want to deal with loud and soft and all that right off the bat, you go right ahead. But I don't teach that at the beginning. We cover that a little later on. Then in Unit 2, we get to naming the white keys. I've already covered this. You look at the black keys and where the white key is in relation to this black key pattern, and that tells you what the white key is. It's up to you to learn them. I don't have any help on that. It's just learn them. They also talk about an octave. A little early, but okay. OCT means 8. And if I take the keys, the white keys, and I start on a key, and I count up 8. The one I'm on is always 1. We don't use 0 in music. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You'll find that they are the same letter name. C to C, A to A, F to F, whatever. Same letter name. They're in the same position in relation to the black keys. That's an octave. It's very common, and you're going to get octaves a lot. And that's what that's about. They throw a lot of signs at you. All these symbols in written music mean something, and I'm going to cover them in the videos because it's important that you understand what all those signs mean, what all those somethings are, because if it wasn't important, it wouldn't be there. So there you are. On page 17, they talk a little bit about rhythm, reading rhythms, but I prefer to use the pieces to read the rhythms, not these exercise things, because first off, without a time signature, you don't know what this is. The book is telling you, give quarter note a beat, and if a quarter note gets a beat, however fast your beats are, it could be different speeds, then do these rhythms. But I prefer to use the actual music, not this stuff, to do it. So I'm skipping this. You can do this on your own. Then they also cover ear training. That's just listening, not looking at the keyboard or nothing, but just listening to notes. Can you tell that one note is higher than another or lower than another? See, a lot of people say they have 10 ears. Well, if you can tell a note next to it is higher or lower than the note, you don't have a 10 ear. A 10 ear would be, you can play 2 notes and a person wouldn't be able to, they sound the same to me, I can't tell. So on this, ear training takes time and you'll get it more over time. We had to do a lot of it in college. I hated it because the music they used made no sense at all. They were just weird stuff, and you're supposed to be able to sing it and know what the pitches are and know what the interval was, and I hated that stuff. Yeah. So I do the ear training, and I don't really do any ear training in my lessons. It's up to you. As you're playing the pieces, you'll learn to listen to this stuff. Over on page 20, they talk about a middle C position. See, we have a lot of positions in piano. I mean, they can all... Bleh. The positions we talk about when you're first learning just kind of help to give you an idea where to put your hand, because you can put your hand most anywhere, huh? So, in a middle C position, of course, you have to know where middle C is on the piano. Well, it's sort of in the middle of the keyboard. It's not in the middle, but it's close. And it's a C. Well, a C is the bottom of a group of 2 keys, black keys. So that's a C. And the one in the sort of in the middle is middle C. It's not called middle C because it's in the middle of the keyboard. It's called middle C because it's in the middle of the grand staff, and I'll come back to that later. And middle C position simply means you put your thumbs, both hands, on that note, and the other fingers go next to it. That's middle C position. In some pieces you use that. Now, you can't use both fingers on one key at a time. The keys aren't wide enough for two fingers, so it's one or the other. It's like a timeshare. One hand or the other gets to play it, and the other hand the thumb has to get out of the way for that time. And the music will indicate usually which hand needs to play the C. And that's middle C position. Yay. Then on page 22 they talk about C position. Well, C position is where the bottom note is C. So both hands, that's C position. The right hand is on middle C, same as middle C position, but the left hand goes down where the C and here. Now there's other C positions, so the position you're in depends on the music. Where does it tell you which C to use? And that's when you're starting out, C position is here. Middle C, and go down an octave for this one, and you got it. On page 24 they're starting to talk a little bit about technique. Technique is how you physically push the notes down and move around and do what you do. I don't really teach much technique in my videos because really to get technique you need a live teacher there who can actually see you do it and give you feedback. Because you can watch me demonstrate it and describe it and then sit down and do it and think you're doing it like I said and get it completely wrong and not know it. I've seen it happen many, many times. So I don't do a lot of technical teaching. I'll try and describe things as best I can, but if you have ability, you can record yourself, video record yourself, and let me see the recording, and I can give you feedback that way if you'd like, but otherwise I can't do much on technique. I use scales for technique for what I do, and I describe the technique I want you to use in the scale video. So if you want to start that, go ahead and go to the C major scale video and do the beginner portion of it. Learn the C major scale. That's a good starting point. Now on page 29 they're starting to introduce you to the staff. All these wonderful symbols, and this is where I really normally will start in a method book. At the beginning I start where they start actually having the music, not before. And that's why I started on page 30 for this book, because that's where the music starts. So on page 29 they're talking, the staff is that group of 5 lines. The treble clef is that squiggly thing, and it's also known as a G clef because it points out where the note G is on the staff. You got to know where the notes are on the staff, and this sign tells you one note, and then you can figure out all the other notes from that one because it goes up or down the alphabet. And if you look, the curly Q of that, the circle part of that, is centered around the next to the bottom line on the staff. And that is a G. It's the G above middle C. You got middle C here, you go up to a G. A G is the lower middle of a group of 3. That G. So when you see a treble clef in the staff and a note is on that line, that next to the bottom line, it is a G. It's not just any G, because you got lots of G's on the piano. It is this G. It's the only one. So when you see a note on that line, on the treble clef, you play that note on the piano. It correlates. So it becomes automatic after a while. You make an effort at first. Then they also show you the bass clef. It's that thing, that curved line with the 2 dots, also known as an F clef, because those 2 dots are, there's a line in between them, and that's the next to the top line in the staff. That is where the F is. That's why it's called an F clef. It tells you where the F is, and this is the F below middle C. So middle C is here, you go down to an F. An F is the white key that's at the bottom of a group of 3 black keys. It's an F. It's this F, not any other F. There's lots of Fs, but only this one. And if you know where that note is, you can figure out where all the other notes are. Then on page 30, we're getting there, they tell you about the grand staff. keyboard instruments use a grand staff. Grand staff usually has 2 staves. It could be 3, but most of the time it's 2 staves. And it has that curly brace at the beginning. And that curly brace is what identifies it as a grand staff. It may or may not have the clef signs like they're shown, because the top staff doesn't have to be a treble clef and the bottom staff doesn't have to be a bass clef. It could be anything. But for our purposes and the music we're going to do, you're always going to see a treble clef in the top and a bass clef in the bottom. That's a good starting point. That lets us have time to get used to this before we start switching things around. So they give you an example there of a grand staff and all the notes shown on the keyboard and the grand staff and where they are, and it's just wonderful. But take a look there on page 30 there with their example of the grand staff with the notes on it. And in the middle of it, right in the middle of it, you'll see a middle C. Middle C is on that little line. We call those ledger lines, above or below a staff, because a staff only has 5 lines, and we got a lot more notes than that. If we want more notes, we got to add these little lines above or below. And that C is on a ledger line below the treble clef staff, or it's on a ledger line above the bass clef. In other words, it's in the middle of a grand staff. It's middle C, it's the middle note. So that note kind of holds it all together, sort of. So let's take a look here on page 31 for Gradual C. You got your grand staff. You got a treble clef in the first top staff, bass clef in the bottom staff, and a C. Oh, isn't this wonderful? A C. Well, they're telling you at the top a C is common time. I won't get into where the C comes from. But it stands for 4/4 time. Now, 4/4 time is the most common time signature used. A time signature is the signature or the indication of the beat, and the rhythm gives you important information about the rhythm and how to do. This is what I've been waiting on. We need a time signature to do the rhythms. We need the time signature to tell us how many beats a note gets. So, and you'll learn this, I'll go over it a number of times, but the top number, the top 4, tells you how far you have to count. In other words, we're going to count to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You're just going to love it. And the bottom note tells us what we're going to count, because if you're going to count something, you want to know what you're counting, I suppose. And the 4 stands for quarter note. I ain't going to get into that. Just think of a fourth or a quarter of something, and you can relate it to quarter note that way. So we're counting quarter notes. So there is the equivalent of, or there is the same as, 4 quarter notes in every measure. It means absolutely nothing if you don't know what a measure is. So what's a measure? See, one thing leads to another, leads to another. You may have to watch this video a few times. A measure is the distance, the space between measure lines. Oh, that's wonderful. So what's a measure line? A measure line are those vertical bars. Occasionally you see them in the line, in the stabs, and they actually go through both stabs. That's all the way through. Those are called measure lines or bar lines. Some people call them a bar line, some people call them a measure line. It kind of depends on what country you're from. I call them either one. Usually I call them bar lines, because the space, the measures can also be called bars. Well, a bar can be called something else too, so let's not get too confusing. So I usually call them measures, the space, but then the lines I call them bar lines. That's confusing enough for me, so let's stick with that. So look at this gradual C at the beginning. You see in the first measure there's 2 half notes. Well, a half note is the same as 2 quarter notes. And there's supposed to be 4 quarter notes in a measure. So if we take the 2 half notes together, that's the same as 4 quarter notes. So we're good. There's 4 beats in that measure. The next measure, we have a quarter note, and a half note. I don't know which way you're going. Which way? But if you count them out, it's the same as 4 quarter notes or 4 beats in that measure. And if you look at all these measures on this piece, both lines, you'll see there's the same as 4 quarter notes in every measure. The last measure on the second line there, the whole note, that circle, that's a whole note. It's the same as 4 quarter notes. It's fine. So rhythm wise, you simply count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And as you get to each beat, at the appropriate beat, you play that whatever note it is. In this case, it's a middle C. And they're telling you right hand, and they're telling you, see the 1 next to the right hand thingy? That's telling you the finger number, your thumb. Use your thumb and you play that. Just go ahead and put your hand on these notes, and you're going to play that middle C on beat 1, and you're going to hold it down for 2 beats, and you're going to play it again on beat 3 and hold it down for 2 beats, and then you keep going and you just keep playing it on the beat it's supposed to be. So which beat is it? Well, you got to know how fast the beats are going, and that's up to you. You go real slow. You go as slow as you have to go to get it, and then over time you can speed it up. So I have here a type of metronome that gives these fancy little flashing lights. They're about useless, but they look cool, so I use them. Most metronomes will give a click. The click is better. If you got a metronome that'll click it, because you can hear the click, and you don't have to watch the lights and the music and the keyboard and whatever all at the same time. You can hear the click. So you want to play a note that's the beat. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the first measure. I played 2 half notes. Each one was 2 beats long. The next measure would be this. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it. So at the beginning of this, we're starting out with the thumb, and you're going to play those 2 half notes. Well, in the second measure, they're still using the same note, but if you'll notice above the line, above the staff, there's a 2. They're telling you here to use your second finger, your index finger on these. And then the next measure, there's a 3. So they want you to use your third finger on these. And then in the last measure, it's a 2. So they're telling you which finger they want you to use. What they're doing is they're using different fingers on repeated notes. I like this very much. This is a good fingering habit to get into. If you have repeated notes, use different fingers. I would use even more than this, but we'll stick with this. And then the third measure here. So you have to remember which finger you're using, which notes you're playing, and how long you're holding it down. And when I learn a piece of music, I do this like just one little piece at a time, and I build it up. So it's like at first, I want to get the notes and the fingering down. Just the notes and the fingering, that's all I want. So I see in the first line here, it's right hand, okay. And at the first measure there, I'm playing C's with the thumb. And the next measure, I'm going to play some C's with the second finger. I'm going 3 C's there. In the third measure, I got 2 C's with the third finger. And then in the next measure, it's 1 C with the second finger. I got that. And I'll go over that as many times as I need to get it. Then in the second line, I got left hand has middle C, thumb. And I got 2 C's, and then the next measure, I've got second finger on C's. Third measure is third finger on C's, 3 of them. And the last measure is second finger on C's. That's the left hand. See, I do it one hand at a time. I work out the right hand fingering, get it right. Then I'll work out the left hand fingering. Right now, you're not playing the hands together, so you don't have to worry about that. But when you do, then you got to go back and try and play the hands at the same time. But do it one hand at a time at first. So we work out the notes and which finger we're using to hit those notes. Hit them, push them down. Don't get violent, just push them down. Then I can go back and add the rhythm. Now I know what note I'm playing, I know what finger I'm using. Now I add this, and this is up to me. I go as slow as I want to go. I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, and I work it out that way. The whole piece, both hands, get them there, and then once I have that, then I can add the next thing, because there's always another thing to add. So I'm building this up a little at a time. So I know what notes to play, I know what fingers I'm using, now I got the rhythm added in, now I can add the dynamics. That is how loud or soft I'm doing. Here, you're starting it out mezzo forte, MF, moderately loud, medium loud, sort of loud, yeah, loud, kind of loud, you know. I can't tell you how loud that is. I have a real problem with dynamics because it's all relative. Medium loud in one situation is soft in another. It depends on the room, the piano, how many people are around. Are you inside a little room like this? Are you outside in a big open amphitheater somewhere? So it depends. Depends on how I feel. If I'm not feeling very loud, then moderately loud isn't going to be very loud. It's different for different people. So I have to decide how loud is moderately loud, and I'll experiment. Okay, that's it. Because however loud that is, it applies for the whole piece on that situation. Tomorrow, it may be different. But however loud it is, it'll be for that whole piece. Anytime I get a medium loud in that piece, it's going to be that loudness. So we have this crescendo in the first two measures. That arrow goes up, and on these crescendo arrows, you read these left to right. So if the arrow starts at a point and the lines gradually get further apart, you get louder. If the lines start apart and gradually come together as you're reading across, you get softer. And that's how I remember them. You can come up with your own way of remembering them, how it works for you, but that's how I do it. So what I look at the first line here, and I see the first two measures have this arrow get louder, and the last two measures have the arrow to get softer. I know I'm starting out medium loud. I don't know how loud I'm going to get. It doesn't say. It's up to me how loud I'm going to get. But I want to plan it out. So each note is going to be just a little bit louder in some cases. And then the third measure, I'm staying loud, and then I'm coming down a little bit softer, and then back to medium loud. However I was at the beginning, that's where I want to be at the end of the line. I have to experiment with this dynamic, and I have to practice the dynamics. Now, they say that using different fingers on the repeated note can help you in the dynamics. I use it for other reasons, because to me, I can play a note with one finger and I can control it on how loud it's getting, but when I start using other fingers, that's just another level of complexity, because different fingers will want to play at different loudness. If you let them just play, they won't all play. Some are louder than others, and you have to work that out. That has to take control. So when you start using multiple fingers to adjust that to me makes it harder. But I like using different fingers on repeated notes, because when you get into more advanced music, this really helps. It is much safer to do it this way than to use the same finger. There's other reasons too, but just I like using different fingers on repeated notes. So, have I said that before? I don't know. So the dynamic, we're starting out medium loud, and you're going to gradually get louder. Now, if you have a long arrow like this, two measures, you might only increase or decrease per measure, not per note. So the first measure is medium loud, and then the next one can be a little louder, and then the next measure is that loudness, and then I come down. You adjust how you get louder or softer based on the music and what you need. It might be a measure at a time, it might be a phrase at a time. I'll talk about phrases later. It might be a note at a time. We'll take it as it comes. I'll explain it when we get there. Now, in this piece, I think I've explained all the symbols, I think, except the in symbol, and the measure numbers, and the rest. There's a lot of stuff. I haven't really explained all these symbols, but as we go through these videos, I will be explaining them because you need to know them all. So for now, let's just leave it at that, and I'll add more. So there's more symbols in here than that, but I'll talk about those a little later. I'd like to play this together with you slowly to double check your rhythms. Notes shouldn't be a problem, you're just playing middle C, but I want to do the rhythms. And you're in middle C position, so your thumbs are on middle C. To start, you're not going to stay there, and for this one you're going to have to just have one hand on the keyboard at a time. So you start with the right hand, just leave the left hand on your lap, it's fine. And then at the end of the first line, when you're holding that down, get your left hand up on top of it and be ready to play when the beat, because at the end of 4 beats on that last measure, you go on. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Then you play the left hand and get the right hand out of the way, and then you can put the right hand on your lap there for the rest of it. This is what I recommend. Normally I would prefer you put both hands on the keyboard and leave them there, but because you're using different fingers on the note, that doesn't work. They'll get in each other's way. Hands hate to get in each other's way. They fight, they don't get along, and then so I'm going to give us 4 counts and we'll play this together slowly. I'm going to go 1, 2, ready, go, and then we play it. See, the number I give is based on the time signature. There's 4 beats in a measure. I'll give 4 counts. So put your right hand up here. So you're starting with thumb on middle C, and here we go. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Off. Now there is a teacher accompaniment at the bottom of this page. This is so the teacher and you can play a duet. A duet is when 2 people are playing at the same time. Now, hopefully it sounds good. I would like to do the teacher part at the bottom of the page, and you do the part you just did. And you'll be able to hear them both. I can't hear them both, but I'll pretend I can hear you and you're doing wonderful and all that and whatever. So I'm going to give us 4 counts and then we're going to start. So go ahead and start with your right hand on the C here. And here we go. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.